Whether or not I am a transphobe depends on your definition of a transphobe.
You potentially change your sex just to get cheaper car insurance, or
I don't think that's a primary reason to transition, but it's definitely a secondary reason.
I want to talk to the kids. Parents watch the video and then hand the phone over to the young kids.
Not Slytherin.
Dr. Money, it's still a pretty drastic procedure, isn't it?
That it seems no more drastic to them than circumcision.
If you see a kid like me, or an adult like me, would you be extra nice to them?
Alrighty, I said that we would have another conversation, and here we are back again to talk about the controversial things that get Andrew Gold cancelled. Is that a good intro? I don't know.
Thanks for having me. That's a great intro. Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me, Kelly. I just love your show. I love everything you do. I'm now even that I'm associating myself by saying I love everything you do. If you go out and do something horrible, I'm now an affiliate. I'm now linked to that. So don't kill anyone.
Oh, well, I wasn't planning on it this week, so you'll be all right for now. The internet forgets pretty quickly, right? So you'll be fine. The internet never forgets. What am I talking about? Speaking of the internet never forgetting, there seems to be an issue with us having a bit of a conversation, Andrew. I'm sure you noticed, but the last time we made a video just talking about your new book, which congratulations on releasing that, just having a conversation about that, the psychology of secrets, doesn't seem too controversial either way. We both received quite a bit of flack from the peoples of the internet for talking. Now, why do you think that is?
Well, it's probably not related to the book because the book, I mean, secrets and authoritarianism, those are things that are right up the street of the viewers of this channel. So it's probably to do with the fact that I am a transphobe. Whether or not I am a transphobe depends on your definition of a transphobe. But if the modern definition appears to be somebody who doesn't believe that a man can literally be a woman, or that there is such a thing as gender as a separate idea or concept from sex. Gender was a word that grew in use. I mean, initially it was used for languages, and I'm a linguist, and I've thoroughly detested having to learn the 3 genders of German, for example. But really, it was used instead of sex because there was a stage, and this is relevant to a lot of what we're going to talk about, because what is off the table changes from society to society, and there was a stage where bodily functions and bodily appetites and sexuality was the thing you can't talk about. And during that time, people didn't want to say the word sex. So some people, as a synonym, used the word gender. There was then a guy called John Money who did experiments on people, and he started saying gender was different. He had...
John Money was the twin studies guy, right? The one who did...
That's right.
Dr. John Money, a psychologist at Johns Hopkins, is one of the leading advocates of sex change operations. Dr. Money is in the Bear Pit tonight with Alvin Davis.
On television that night was a brilliant young psychologist. John Money was a pioneer in the astonishing new field of sex change surgery.
Dr. Money, it's still a pretty drastic procedure, isn't it?
Well, it's a drastic procedure by your standards and mine, but for the people who are living in desperation, perhaps the best way to understand it is that it seems no more drastic to them than circumcision.
Yes, I learned about that in school, believe it or not.
Wow. Okay, yeah, he did the twins. One of them had like a botched genitalia, and so he decided, okay, I'm going to cut it off and basically let them grow up as a girl, believing they're a girl, and they ended up taking their own life. And I think so did the other twin. He screwed them up so badly by doing that. That doesn't necessarily say anything about whether somebody could be happy or not living as a trans person. But what we do need to recognize is that John Money is one of the first people to use gender in this other kind of way.
Horrific experiment, by the way. Horrific experiment.
Oh, it was.
He had psychotherapy, I think, as well, where he was being the young kid that was being brought up as a girl, was having consistent therapy, being told, you are a girl, you are a girl, you are a girl. And it never gelled, ever, which is why both of them, I think. Yeah, awful. Sorry, I totally interrupted you. Please carry on.
No. That's a really good point. That's really good detail, and like it. But it is important to say that this is a one-off case that doesn't. We can't necessarily extrapolate that no trans people could be happy in the other, identifying or living as the other sex or being perceived as the other sex or whatever it might be. So that's that one-off case. But that's where gender sort of started as this kind of separate concept, and it's worked its way into the language now. And now it's just like if you say, "Hey, people can't change sex," people go, "Yes, but your gender you can," and it's like, well, this is a thing you've made up, okay? And I'm an atheist, I'm secular, I don't like any woo-woo stuff. I'm just not for it. From a young age, I felt like I was a contrarian. I had at the synagogue, there was a rabbi talking about stuff, and I would always be like, oh man, this is nothing to me. Other people bought into it. They loved it, and it helped them, and they were happy with it, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not here to tell people not to believe in trans, not to believe in religion, or any of those kinds of things. What I always do live by is that, was it Carl Sagan, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And people get this wrong a lot of the time. A lot of people who are religious, for example, would try to make me prove God doesn't exist. You can't prove God doesn't exist, to which I say, I'm not the one with the extraordinary claim here. I'm the one saying I don't know how the universe started, but you've got an extraordinary claim, which is that it was God, and depending on how literally you take the Bible, Adam and Eve and all of these things, you need some extraordinary evidence to prove that. Similarly, if you're going to prove that gender is some kind of different thing from sex, we need extraordinary evidence. And so far, I can't really get past the first line of inquiry, which is, okay, so this man here, for example, if it is a man who wants to identify as a woman, this man says he is a woman. Okay, what in that sentence does woman mean, right? What does it mean? What is a woman in that case? And I don't want to sort of bang people over the head with this. I don't want to stop people believing in stuff they believe in. I don't want to insult or offend people, but it's not enough for me to go along with. People say, oh, they really struggle with that one, and I'd be interested to see what people say in the comments, and if they're able to do so without anger, because that's not going to help convince those people who don't agree. But just to hear people say, no, here's what's happening. When a man says he identifies as a woman, what it means is this and that. I've never heard an answer that even comes close to being satisfactory. And we never know when we're wrong about ideologies. We feel like we're right about everything we believe in, but most of us also believe that we can't possibly be right about everything. So some of our dearest held convictions must be completely wrong. And I might be totally wrong about the trans thing. But what I do know is that if an ideology or a philosophy cannot even survive the first question, if we cannot even define what the thing is, we're probably on shaky ground there. So I don't know what you think about that.
There's something in the way that we talk about it which seems to make people angry, I think. And it comes down to terminology and language and stuff. And if I've seen you pose the question at a few of your guests, and you've interviewed, scientists, transgender people, including Richie Herron, which I want to talk about soon as well, because his interview was so eye-opening and really, really interesting, which I want to get onto. But if you ask me the question, do I think trans women are women? I would say no. That is the truth of it to me, and I think to science. I think it's hard to say otherwise because it just cannot factually, biologically be true. And that this is where their gender thing comes into it. Well, their gender, they identify as a female, is something that I struggle to make sense of, to be honest. And, I've not had particularly strong views on this. I've not come out and made a bunch of videos about it in that way, but I also don't want to be a bystander in this. I want to hear from both sides and actually make a point somewhere, because I know that kids are being hurt by this. I think there are lots of children being hurt by this, and had it been available when I was at school, like the idea of taking puberty blockers and things like this, would I have done it? Me, who was struggling with lots of mental health problems, would I have wanted to stop that? Maybe, to be honest. I was of the generation that got, antidepressants given to us at willy-nilly, right? 14 years old, I had very circumstantial problems where I was kicked out of my house because I was exercised for being a demon. Like, That's not neurons in my brain not quite firing off right. That's a circumstance, and I was given drugs for that, which didn't work, obviously. So the medicalization of it with children and stuff, I think is dangerous, and we need to be able to have a conversation about it. And I do think trans people need understanding. I think they need to be heard in their gender dysphoria and what that means. Is that more of a mental health problem than a you're born in the wrong body? Maybe I'm not educated enough on it, and that's how I'll always feel, I think, because there's a million people to tell you, well, what about this and what about this?
The problem we have, unfortunately, is that people will point you towards certain studies saying some trans people are happier. People on the other side will point you towards one saying they're not. They'll say that, some will say that, trans people who are unable to transition or unable to, convert and take hormones and things are depressed. Others will say they're much worse afterwards and they're so happy they didn't do it. It's really, really hard to find the right science as to happiness levels afterwards and whether it helped. So I think it's a tough one, and you're absolutely right to be cautious with it. And I would always want to be as well. What I'd say to a lot of people listening who are going to be angry hearing this is that they know Scientology because they know your channel. That's probably how they came across it. It's probably how they came across me. They know about other cults and things, and they know that in cults and Scientology or whatever it is, it's very hard to have a dissenting opinion. And as soon as you do have a dissenting opinion, it makes the people who are in that cult feel very defensive, protective, and angry. And then they don't really take on what the people talking are saying. And they just, suppressive person. You must be a worse person than me because you have this belief. And I think what would be an interesting challenge to make, and I don't mean it to sound patronizing, but I'd love to see if people are up for this, is to set this kind of challenge to viewers right now and say, hey, maybe you're feeling that way. And maybe you're right and I'm wrong and Kelly's wrong, but please try to understand that we're coming at this from a compassionate angle. You don't have a monopoly on compassion, and you might be wrong as well. And if you are wrong, you're getting something really wrong that is affecting a lot of lives. Of course, you mentioned children, but also just women's safety, women's changing rooms and spaces, and also the concept of truth, because I'm a firm believer that those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. So it's really important that we get this right. And as I say, even the philosophy at the first or second line doesn't hold up. And I know there'll be a million comments saying, what do you mean it doesn't? Yes, it does. And those people will not explain how it does, because I'm still waiting. I still think there must be more to this. And it doesn't seem to be. So we're in a strange position here where that just saying I don't think that trans thing is a thing can get you cancelled from bookshops, and you're not allowed to speak in certain events and things like that.
Which has happened to you, right?
Yeah, that's right. So with my book, The Psychology of Secrets, I was supposed to speak at all sorts of places. There was an event at the Tate Gallery. There was an event, several different festivals. All of them after inviting me, approached my publisher to say, we're going to have to disinvite Andrew because he's a controversial figure. None of them said that that they disagreed with me necessarily, but I know that there's a lot of this kind of progressive magical thinking going on in the publishing world, in the sort of media world, and all of that stuff. And it's very painful when it does happen, because a lot of guys in my position just have a lot of bravado, and they just say like, screw those or whatever. But I want to be honest about that feeling, because I don't want to give the impression to those who disagree with me that I'm here to be this horrible monster who hates trans people and would have hated gay people 30 years ago or whatever that is. I'm someone who cares a lot for those people. I've entered a career where I'm able to try and get inside the minds of people because I care so much. So that's really hurtful when people suggest that that's not the case. And when I'm excluded from something, look, that's on an evolutionary biology level, that's you being kicked out of your tribe. There's not much more painful than that. I would point people to a great article. What's it? Is it Paul someone? Paul Graham. You can go to paulgraham.com/say, S-A-Y, .html. It's just an article called What You Can't Say. And I found it absolutely fascinating. And it's from 20 years ago. I don't even know who Paul Graham is. It might be someone looks him up and he's like a murderer of babies. Or I don't know. But I don't know who he is. I've just read this one article. And he speaks about the nature of taboo. And he speaks at one point about, say, a 30-year-old woman who may have gone abroad, learned lots of different languages, lived with different cultures, or just met different kinds of people and had loads of different experiences. When that woman comes back and finds, a 15-year-old boy who's only ever been at their high school or secondary school, never really left home, they're going to have very, very different limits to their taboos, or very different windows of taboo. And so that 30-year-old who comes back having actually experienced the world will find some of the taboos that the 15-year-old who's only ever been in his town in England, they'll find those ridiculous.
Yeah. These
ridiculous taboos. And that the kid will say, oh, don't say that. That's against my religion. That's against... And the 30-year-old will be, who's travelled, or the 50-year-old or whatever it is, will go, what? Like, I've lived a life here. So I do think there's something to experiencing the world, trying to understand different cultures. And then when you come back, it's quite a closed-minded world that only allows certain thoughts. And the last point I'd make on that is, for those people who think I should be, or you should be, or we should be shut up or whatever, try and find me one time in history, since we never know when we're on the good side or bad side. Maybe we're all on the bad or good side. We never know. But find me one time in history where the good guys were the ones cancelling speech, refusing to debate, and telling all the other people that they are worse than them in terms of righteousness. You will not find it. It's always been the ones who are open to free speech and to discussing things, even if it doesn't seem like it in the time, who are looked back on a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm so with you on that. And neither of us but can claim any experience as trans people. You know, we're both straight white people. Like we don't have that experience. You know, we're not claiming to, but we should still be allowed to talk about it because of free speech.
Can I make a point on that? Because I just interviewed someone who is seen as sort of an anti-woke crusader called Alex Phillips, and she's like very fiery and very controversial, and I think a lot of the viewers would hate her. But she was trying to tell me that she doesn't mind being catcalled.
I watched that interview.
You get heckled or I think you said actually in your video you don't mind getting a cat called or whatever.
Of course I don't. I mean, do you know, I grew up with sort of builders wolf whistling out of vans. I'm not some sort of, you know, like hysterical, hyperbolic, you know, I'm a victim type of woman.
She was trying to say that, and that is just not the experience of the women in my life at all. They can't stand it. It makes them feel scared. They hate it. But when I said to her, as you know, because you watched it, when I said to her, like, hang on, you know, a lot of women don't like catcalling. That's not okay. And all of these things, she started to try and use what I would see as like a lefty woke thing at the moment, but it's still very much alive on the right. And we ignore that sometimes because we see it as such a woke left thing, which is this lived experience thing. So she said to me, are you as a man telling me, a woman, how I should feel? And I had to say to her that is not science. That is emotion. That is something that's become popular the last 10 years, which is to tell people you can't speak on this issue because you don't have lived experience. Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. We should be able to, maybe you can have some proviso of okay, or like some mitigating understanding of, okay, maybe there are some elements that I might not entirely get. I would like to have experienced it, and I have sympathy for these people, but we need to be able to express things without always worrying, oh gosh, am I the right person given I'm not the right demographic to discuss this? Because again, that way bigotry lies. When we start not considering what people say, but who the person is, or the skin color of the person, or the sex of the person who says them, that's never been the right way, the right path in history.
I'm so with you. You said something else in another interview that I thought was really good, and it was that people who are in the middle, like centrist or whatever, need to say stuff more, you know. And I don't think either of us are particularly extreme. I reckon you probably lean a little more to the right, and I probably lean a little more to the left. But we still can find common ground, and you know, and have a conversation. Probably. I did one of them quizzes, you know, like a political quiz, because I'm not super, you know, I'm interested in the arts. Like I've never been so involved with politics, but I have been getting more interested in it. I saw a thing that said, where do you sit on the political compass? I was like, all right, I'll do it. It was like getting sorted into my Hogwarts house. It was mad.
Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin.
Not Slytherin, eh? Are you sure? You could be great, you know.
You know, and it said exactly that. You know, I had probably some more conservative views than I thought, because obviously if you're conservative, it's like being in Slytherin. You know, but which surprised me, and I was like, oh, okay, you know, but more towards the middle. And I was like, well, fair enough. I'm somewhere in the middle of this. Maybe that means I've not got, I don't know, extreme enough opinions on anything, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't know. Where do you put yourself politically?
It's so complicated, that, because what does anything even mean? 20 years ago, I would have been at least socially on the left. Now, obviously, economics, economics and social life are two very different things. And I think for some reason they've just, we've decided people who are economically left, so they think there should be more investment in the working classes and so on, and that would be better. They also seem to go for a lot of the causes in this kind of binary of oppressor and oppressed and those kinds of things. And if you are a little bit to the right, it's because you consider yourself to be more of a realist, and so you say, hey, the poor people aren't going to do better in a country where all the money goes to them and isn't sort of invested properly, and actually we need to bring the companies and everything up from the and that will sort out the whole country. These are economic arguments that could be argued all day by the cleverest people in the world on the left and the right, and both of them will make really, really good points. Any country that goes too far right or left obviously turns into just lunacy. Now, socially, we've attached things to that because of the sort of realism aspect of the right or the conservatives or whatever. They are much less likely to adopt what they would see as new fashions. However, occasionally they are going to get things wrong. They were way too late on things like civil rights for gay people, for black people, and whatever. Although it is worth pointing out that in the UK, there have been, I think I'm right in saying this, 3 female prime ministers, and all of them have been conservative. There's been one non-white prime minister, and he was conservative as well. I think, someone correct me if I'm wrong, that gay marriage was brought in by the Conservative government. So the Conservatives would say, hey, look, we're realists and we're just going to take a little bit longer. We need a bit more evidence. The people on the left would say, screw you guys. We needed these civil rights years ago. And where were you? And
be kind.
And be kind, which just don't even get me started on that. Because again, it's just a refusal to understand how life works and how humanity works. And they think that they are somehow more empathetic and kind. And I think once you start thinking that, you're losing the battle already, because the assumption that people disagree with you because they're less compassionate than you is a really solipsistic and not very compassionate and not very empathetic worldview. And there's no surprise that the people who hold those kinds of views and also who virtue signal, things like that, tend to score higher on the dark triad scores, what was it, psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism. So this idea that people who seem or feel like they're good or nice people is utter nonsense. It tends to be the other way around. It's people who are compassionate don't go around shouting about these things. They care more about doing good than looking good. So yeah, as to where I am, look, I'm pro-choice. I'm an atheist. I'm a vegan. Gay rights, gay marriage, all the things that they want me to be. I'm those things. I just don't agree on all of the things. The trans thing is one of them, anything involving magical thinking, and I show concern for mass immigration. That's the other one that gets me in trouble with what I would call my own people.
We said at the beginning of this interview, I'm Andrew and I'm a transphobe, but you're not. That's the thing, isn't it? And I've watched a lot of the interviews and things you have done, the stuff you've published online about this topic, obviously knowing that I'm going to talk to you about it today. From the interviews I've seen, it comes from a completely compassionate place of trying to gain understanding and looking at the science. And like I said, your interview with Richie had me in tears, absolute tears, because of what this poor guy's gone through. I would have never even heard of that kind of a story ever. Like, detransitioning is honestly quite a new thing to me. I'd never heard of it before, probably because I haven't got all of that kind of stuff on my feed. I happen to be friends with you, so I've seen that stuff. And there are people I follow, like Blair White and things like that, who are transgender people saying the same things that you are saying and your guests are saying, because I think that predators and stuff that are in those spaces in, claiming that they are trans are not trans, and it's about as much as protecting people who are genuinely trans from people who are just trying to, use that label for their own gain, like trans maximalists, which that's a whole other thing. But, it's people can do some horrible, horrible things if they're allowed to, you know?
Yeah, having dinner paid for you or getting drinks at a bar.
Has it happened? Yeah, so like people have started buying you dinners and stuff.
Yeah, I've been offered a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. This one says you can get cheaper car insurance.
You should take every advantage given to you.
You should potentially change your sex just to get cheaper car insurance, or
Yeah, transmaxing, that was a weird one. Sasha Bailey was my interviewee for that. And transmaxing is, I still don't entirely understand it, but I got the impression that it seems to be people who often are incels, that is involuntary celibates. These are people who hate women, men who hate women, who believe that women can have it's easier for women. Life is easier for women, which is utter nonsense.
Wild.
There are definitely things that are easier for women, and there are things that are easier for men. But the idea that it is easier for women is madness. But they believe that, and they think that they're going to have these trans things. They're going to look like a beautiful woman, and people are going to treat them amazingly, and their life's going to be amazing. And obviously, that's just never going to be the case. With Richie Herron, it's really sad, and this is going to sound facetious when I say it, but I really mean this. And it's not often that you sit in a room with a guy who doesn't have a penis. I mean, that is rare, and that was on my mind. And I'm going, bloody hell, this guy, and you go, gosh, what's happened to him? And well, what's happened to him is he got caught up in an ideology at the worst possible time when it was at its most fervent. I don't think it is quite as fervent now. I think there are more and more people speaking out and going, hang on a minute, we got confused here. We thought this was a civil rights issue, and actually this is far more complicated than that. We have something that's known as the symptom pool, and in every generation it changes. And what it is that particularly girls of an age from about 14 to 19, let's say, have a really hard time of it. And a lot of that is because they're first being sexualized by boys and often by older men. That's a really horrible, difficult feeling. I know you went through a lot of difficult times, obviously, because of your family as well. But there's all sorts of reasons why 14 to 19-year-old or 13 to 20-year-old women have a really, really hard time. Now, I used to live in Argentina, and what happens over there, if you're having a hard time and you're having all these symptoms, is you're told that you have a demon inside you. Now, that doesn't happen in the major cities, but in the outskirts, in the impoverished parts, it does. And so you're told, oh, don't worry, all the things you're going through, which we would recognize as, I don't know, eating, well, you shouldn't even say on YouTube really, but problems with that, and problems with OCD, depression, those kinds of things.
Wait, can you not say eating disorders on YouTube? You're not allowed to say that anymore.
I think you probably can get away with it. YouTube used to be a lot more. They used to come down a lot harder on everything, and just that word would have done it. And I think nowadays it's probably maybe fine, but because it's your channel, I didn't want to take the risk.
Fine, I said it. You can say it.
Yeah, well, those kinds of things are what they were going through, and so people are like, you've got a demon inside you, and like a lot of us here would maybe laugh at that, and go, gosh, these silly primitive people, they think there's an exorcist, they think there's a demon inside these people. Well, they might laugh at us because we're going, this is a man, but he's got a woman gender inside him. We can't really point to it. I mean, Helen Joyce is I think she coined the term the gendered soul. It's the same kind of symptom in a different society. So instead of saying this is a demon, or in other countries, anorexia, that was another one. There's a lot of research about anorexia and social contagion. I think there was a study on, I think it was Japan, where they had basically 0 cases or very, very few cases of it. And after Hollywood movies started to make an impact over there, suddenly all the young girls had it, and they had this just epidemic of anorexia in Japan. So we know that humans are liable to do that. That is just a fact. And we know that most of the girls who want to transition to being boys are young. They tend to be 14 to 19. There are very few 50-year-old women who I've almost not encountered any of them who at 50 years old say, God, I always wanted to be a man because I'm a trans person, and finally I'm allowed to, I'm going to transition now. It just doesn't happen, or very, very rarely. It tends to be those young girls who are maybe a bit confused, maybe they're lesbians and they don't quite understand or realize at that point. So that's the symptom pool. With men, it's a little bit different. You do have that young cohort who are struggling in the same way. I think Richie was a case like that, although he didn't actually transition until he was older. But a lot of boys who might be gay, some are struggling with autism and trying to fit in with society and understanding what sex is. And then you have a much older cohort of men who transition. And these are guys who tend to be in their 50s and 60s who often, and it's very controversial to say, but I've spoken to so many of them, they have something called autogynephilia, which is an arousal in seeing themselves as women and being perceived by others as women. And there was a great interview done by Kirsty Young with the artist Grayson Perry, who is a transvestite, I believe. I'm not entirely sure, but Grayson Perry is a guy who goes around and does things like wears a strap-on dildo when he's around children, things like that. This is the guy who's constantly invited on to Have I Got News for You, with big TV channel things in the UK, whereas I'm not allowed to talk in bookshops. And this is all done in the name of social progress and wokeism. This is what I mean about we never know when we're going right or wrong, because this man is, in my opinion, something of a deviant, the kind of behavior that he's extolled.
Well, no children should be exposed to that. It's simple as, isn't it? There shouldn't be any way about it. Children shouldn't be exposed to sexualization in any way. I don't think anyway. It's wrong.
Well, there is a push for it to have children exposed to it, again, in the name of this kind of wokeness and in the name of, hey, why shouldn't you? Kids should all be involved. And I don't quite get it. I'm also hesitant to talk about that too much without seeming like a sort of conservative 1950s dad. But I think it should be pretty clear cut, as you say, though. I mean, it's mad. But Kirsty Young said to him, do you think there are some people who don't, they don't like what you're doing because they resent the fact that you are doing something that is sexual in nature. You're getting a sexual kick out of it, and they haven't consented to being an unwitting participant in that. And I thought it was just such a brilliantly worded question, and so rare from like the BBC, or I think it was a BBC radio show. It was so rare for a mainstream channel to be brave enough to ask that question. And he said, yes, that is the case. He's not shying away from it. There are a lot of older men who do get a sexual arousal out of it. Then we've got the question of, well, do we want to shame them for their kinks? I'm not a kink shamer. I think people should be able to have their sort of arousal and do their things or whatever. What I don't think should happen is that we should then have to start changing locker rooms and sports teams, kicking women out of their Olympic dreams and things like that, just to placate somebody's sexual arousal. We have nightclubs for those kinds of things where those guys can go. And I like that they have that, because that's the kind of liberal politics I favour, or liberal philosophy that I have. I want them to be able to enjoy their weird kinks, do your thing, fill your boots in your spaces, but we're not going to change policies and laws for your kink.
I think that is completely fair. Just going back to what you said about you don't see many like young girls, older women, transitioning into men. But younger girls, there are lots of non-binary, or, which, even trans people will probably get mad at me for even saying non-binary, because there's a point of contention of what that is, and non-binary people want to be trans, but they're not trans. I don't know. I'm not even going to get started on that. But do you think that it could come from a place of like suppressing sexualization and puberty? Like you said before, we are exposed to it. I can also attest to the experience of being sexualized as a teenager, as a minor, from older people. And that isn't breaking news or individual to me. That is normal. It seemed normal. Now, I've mentioned before, I did struggle with an eating disorder, and the idea that I could get rid of my period and not have boobs and not develop like that was great, because then I don't have to deal with this problem. I don't have to deal with people making me uncomfortable in that way. And I don't know if gender dysphoria is the same or not, but I know what body dysmorphia is. I understand that because I did struggle with that. And it would have been unkind if the people around me had been like, oh, you identify as being obese. Oh, well, yeah, I guess if you identify, that's fine. And keep doing what you're doing. We support you. In response to my mental illness, that would have been, I wouldn't be here. I would not be here. Like, so where do we draw the line? Is it kind to is it kind to fuel that? If we're saying it's delusion, is it kind to fuel that?
That's a really good question, and I think there's a reason that there's that old expression, like if you're young, or what is it? If you have a heart, you're left wing when you're younger, and if you have a brain, I've said it wrong, I've ruined it, but you're more conservative, and that isn't to say that it is necessarily right or wrong to be either of those things. As I said before, there are people far more intelligent than us who could extol the virtues of both sides and have a really interesting debate. So I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong about left or right. I think what does happen, though, as you get older, and the reason that more people become conservative, I used to think when I was like 21, the people who were conservative, that was because they were in it for themselves, and that people became more selfish when they're older. But there's just no evidence for that. There's no evidence that older people are more selfish, apart from young people feeling like the older people are a different tribe from them, and then just deciding, well, they must have more negative traits than us. I think as I've become older, I've definitely become less selfish. And it's said all the time that once you have children, I don't have kids, but people with children become particularly less self-obsessed, and more about the community, more about their own family, the people around them. So this idea that they're more so if we count that out, or at least say, hey, there's not enough evidence for that, what's going on? And I think it's this, I've got a new puppy, as you know, right? And I love her. And I also know that if I put her in another room at the moment, she just cries and screams. So I don't do it, and I can't do it. And it hurts me to leave her. It really hurts. It's like painful. It physically hurts to leave her in another room and just to hear her like yelling like that. I also know that long term, she's going to suffer a lot more if I don't at some point start trying to train her, start trying to make her go through that pain and to see, hey, everything was all right after 20 minutes. If I just do everything that she wants of me, it's going to make her suffer more. It's going to make, and that's the kind of thing you realize when you start to have kids, when you have a dog, when you have responsibilities in life, you start to realize sometimes the really difficult thing is actually not doing the nice thing or being kind, the be kind thing. Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. That's what that expression is. It's a really popular expression, of course. We don't always really analyze it. We don't really think about what it means. So that means when you've got children, trying to understand, and of course, if somebody's anorexic, you don't say to them, yeah, you are pretty fat, actually, you're right. You say, hang on, we're the parents, or we're the adults, we're the doctors, whoever we are, and we've been given a responsibility here. And yes, it might be that I'm getting this wrong and she actually is fat, but from everything I can see, that's not the case. So let's err on the side of caution here. Yes, it might be true that this man who has a penis and all of these things is actually somehow a woman inside, even though they can't explain to me what that means. I still don't know, fine. But there's no extraordinary evidence here. So let's err on the side of caution and say, no, you're getting that wrong. And those who equate that to homosexuality and saying, when we used to say back in the day, oh, homosexuality is an illness or whatever, that is so wrong-headed. And it's such an easy comparison, but a false one to make. And it's so sad that people do it, because I think that's responsible now for so much of this madness, because people are so scared of getting it wrong as they did with homosexuality. But we have to remember that life is always more complicated than that. It doesn't mean like, oh, we were wrong, but the conservatives, let's say, the right-wing people back then, the religious fundamentalists, they were utterly wrong. But they were religious fundamentalists, of course they were. So we have to treat each thing as a totally separate thing. One group of people were saying, hey, I want to have reciprocated love with another agreeing adult, and who well, do your thing, fill your boots, enjoy yourself. The other people are saying, I'm not the sex that I was designated at birth. And you go, well, hang on, that's not a thing. And we need a lot of evidence to suggest that it is. People saying it's true is nowhere near enough evidence to suggest that this is anything close to being true.
In Hawaii, they have something called the mahu, right, which means in the middle, right, and it's been that way for, I think, since like the 1700s or something, and the mahu are celebrated as their own thing, right? Why is it offensive to say a transgender woman is a transgender woman? Why is that that is now offensive to say that, rather than saying a transgender woman is a woman? Do you know what I mean? Why can we not? Because I think for people going through this, it's incredibly difficult. They go through so much discrimination. and the dysphoria of not feeling comfortable or right. They need really, really a lot of mental health support, which we are lacking severely in this country, and I know in America too. That the people who are saying, I am trans, I am a trans woman, I'm a trans man, oh, let's just let them be trans people, you know? Why is it? I don't understand why it has to be, well, no, not just a trans woman, I am a woman. And then it's like, well, but we're not the same. Like, and it's then becomes, I become then also offensive for saying that, but it's true, you know? But then it's gender's a construct and it's not real. But that's just not what, I don't know. There's a lot.
Well, this is why I get frustrated sometimes, and I don't want to call out like the Scientology audience, but some people, if they've even listened this far, you know, they know about thought terminating cliches, right? They know about just suppressive person, transphobe. They know that. They know that you have to look deeper and get them to actually explain things. And so, God, they should know that when people say things like, you say, so what is a woman? And they say, it's a social construct. That is no different to Scientology speak. That doesn't mean anything. A social construct. So what we can try and engage with that. If I try and engage with that on an intellectual level, I put myself back to when I was 20 years old at university, when everything could be a thing because theories were fun and exciting. Okay, it's a social construct. Gender is a social construct. What that's saying is, we say men are men because they like blue, or because we've told them to like blue, we've told them to like football and things, and that's why they do. We've told the women they like cooking and cleaning and ballet. Well, it's just ridiculous stereotypes. Okay, well, maybe I agree with that. I mean, why does that mean, though, that a person then a child, let's say a little boy who likes playing with Barbies, has to be put in the girl box? If gender is a social construct, they should be able to enjoy being a man and a boy or whatever, and doing all the things that are the social construct. So not only does the argument really mean nothing, that gender is a social construct, it's actually an argument in favor of gender realists or gender critical people like myself. I mean, it's just saying, yeah, a girl can want to play football.
Yeah.
That I believe that passionately. I don't think she should be told that she's born in the wrong body. Now, when I say that, people in the comments will say, nobody ever does that. Nobody ever tells these people they're born in the wrong body. That's palpably untrue. They are told that they are in the wrong body, not just because they like football when they're a girl, but because they like football when they're a girl and they're struggling with all sorts of mental health difficulties. Then often the answer from society is, you're in the wrong body. And that is a terrible thing to tell somebody. And it's very conservative.
That's not far from the demon thing either. It's not far from the exorcism demon thing, like that you know, did a whole documentary about. I will link it in the description below. You know what? I had a sharp reality wake up with this. Have you ever heard of like blue job, pink job? Have you heard that before?
Yeah. We do it all the time when my wife doesn't want to do any work or around the house.
Right.
Everything's a blue job in our house.
I have, you know, in my youth, I'm only 29, but, you know, whatever. When I was younger, I worked in lots and lots of bars and things like that, right? One of our managers once was like, oh, yeah, we need a keg changing, but it's a blue job, so don't worry about it. I was like, what? What do you mean a blue job? What are you talking about? I'll do it. Well, that was a big mistake, wasn't it, Andrew? Because those kegs are freaking heavy and they are hard to move, hard to attach. I did it wrong, obviously. I was like, you know what? Maybe it was a blue job.
That's really funny you say that. There's been a bit of a blame apportion now. So a lot of the sort of TERFs, right? The trans exclusionary radical feminists. These are like ultra left wing, old fashioned left wing women. A lot of them seem to be lesbians, but not all, of course. So this was a case with Julie Bindel, who is a journalist in the UK, super left wing, very, very sort of, she's quite anti-men, but we had a really, really good chat. And she's really worried about the whole trans thing herself, because she sees it as men saying this is what women are like, and sort of doing woman face, like you might do blackface, you know, long hair, funny nails, and all of these kinds of things. And Julie, some might say, didn't cause some of this 20, 30 years ago, but maybe they sort of set this thing in motion, because they are some of the feminists who back in the day would say men and women are exactly the same, and anything a man can do, a woman can do. Now and anything a woman can do, a man can do. That's palpably untrue in both directions. It's just utterly untrue. We like to believe it's true, and as much as I'm saying I think women should be able to like football and men should like Barbies, we also have to realize there's nuance in the world, right? And it doesn't mean that there are differences. There are essential biological differences. And again, that's something that we're likely to admit the longer we live, because we have more experience of these differences. And so I asked Julie Bindel about that. I said, you used to say they were exactly the same. So why does it bother you now if a man says they can be a woman and a woman can be a man? And she said, yeah, I think I got that wrong. I think a lot of us got that wrong. And we have to admit, she was just trying to prove a point, I think, about the social construct of gender. The reality is we are different. Not only are we physically extremely different, and we could talk about the 2 male boxers who just won gold in the Olympics. And these are, I don't know enough about one of them, but the other one, Imane Khelif, is a really inexperienced boxer, relatively, compared to the others. And he was fighting against the best female boxers out there. He won every match 5-0, 5-0, 5-0. The only other person at the entire Olympics in boxing to do that was the other man. So obviously there are some issues there, and there are huge differences, but not just in physicality, but evolution. So there are cultural evolutionary differences. The fact that women give birth, but the fact also that women for 300,000 years were raising the children and the men were going out hunting and foraging. I mean, how can that not have some difference on our cultural and our psychological makeups? It has to. I believe in liberalism, and I think because of that, we should try to ignore those as much as possible. And try to say, hey, anyone can do anything as much as possible. But we do have to realize as well that there are fundamental differences between men and women. And before anyone shouts at me about the boxer Imane Khelif, I had Dr. Emma Hilton on. She's a developmental biologist. And as far as she's concerned, there's no doubt. These are 2 men. They failed chromosome tests, they're XY chromosomes. And again, like with religion, whenever I try to sort of argue with religion or Scientology or any of those things, there will be paragraphs and paragraphs of gobbledygook that people will write and presume they know better than scientists. And so I can't convince those people. But I'm hoping that there are enough fence sitters who are watching this who will go, oh, hang on, I only heard the BBC say this was a woman who was unfairly treated. That they won't realize, no, this is somebody with XY chromosomes. These are men who developed badly, and something went a bit wrong, and so their genitalia, the male genitalia, wasn't on show at the beginning, but through puberty it would be, and so it's very likely that both these men would be fully aware that they are men. So, and by the way, I feel sorry for them. It's a really difficult position to be in, to have been brought up. We talked about John Money before. Imagine the psychological issues they must both be going through, having thought they were girls growing up. There's a great book called Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides, one of my favorite ever books. And it doesn't really touch on trans. Well, it doesn't touch on trans at all. It's just a coming of age novel about a child who grows up not knowing their gender or their sex or whatever. And it's just a beautifully written, amazing novel. So I'd recommend that to anyone, Middlesex.
I've obviously got friends here that have spoke to me about this boxer, and they're like, it's not even a trans thing. It's about, they were intersex, and they are a woman, and that's not fair. And I saw that photo you posted on your Substack. You write some very, very good articles on there, and I definitely recommend people subscribe to it. But that photo of the boxer literally made me have a physical reaction. It was like, oh my gosh, this is unfair. This is so unfair,
Yeah. It's a guy. It's a guy, and he knows he's a guy, and that's why he didn't push back. He didn't try to get. People say there's some sort of Russian conspiracy. It's not a bad argument, because there is reason that Russia would try to do this, and the IBA, which is the boxing association that the Olympics has distanced itself from, is sort of Russian state backed or has some involvement with the Russian state. So it's not a bad argument, except that the chromosomal studies were carried out in 2 different neutral locations around the world. Why would they fake that? And why wouldn't Khelif come out and say, hang on, I've had another test done in the UK or in Algeria, my home country, any of these things, I promise you, here are the studies, I'm XY. Now, people listening might say she shouldn't have to, if she were a she shouldn't have to prove this. And I get that, but unfortunately, we're in a position right now where studies have come out showing that he's a man. So if he wants to show otherwise, again, we need extraordinary evidence. If you want to get into a ring and box and batter women in front of the world, we need extraordinary evidence. So those people listening and watching now going, no, because I heard someone say it was a woman. I say to you, why is it you're angry at me saying this? You guys are the ones who need the extraordinary evidence here, because they failed the chromosomal studies. So we know that you need really big evidence to explain to me why a boxer bloke was able to beat up women and absolutely tear them apart for the world's entertainment, and why the BBC went along with it, cheered him on, and just had a go at the rest of us in what is part of a huge clampdown on alternative social media news, which is something that I've been having a go at recently, because they can't stand the second opinion. 50 years ago, they would have said this person's a woman, and that would have been that. There would have been no other voice, and we would have just gone, okay. Now there are enough people out there who are finding bits of evidence, real evidence. I mean, you don't want a conspiracy theorist. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, although I would always listen to ones like the people on the left saying the Russians were against him or whatever. They're trying to shut us down right now. That sounds conspiratorial, but every newspaper in the UK, everything the government says is about Elon Musk and about Twitter and X, and we have to shut these people down. Why don't we start with the BBC, who we know just last week, and Sky Sports and all of these news channels who are reporting that this person's a woman when we know they are not? It's insanity. So we're living through a really terrifying age.
Yeah, when you rely on your news media to be unbiased and honest, and they're not, we're in a really scary time, aren't we? Because they themselves are spreading incorrect information. Do you think it's just to not get, heat thrown at them? Like, didn't a bunch of people unsubscribe from the BBC TV license just recently? They've been cancelled for something else. I'm not sure. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. Well, look, I don't think that they are deliberately lying. I don't think the BBC, I don't think Sky Sports, Channel 4, I don't think they deliberately lie. And I'm a big fan of Hanlon's razor, which is never attribute malice to something that can be explained by stupidity. And I don't think it really means stupidity. It just means cult think. And we've seen this before. Look, they're absolutely right when they criticize the alternative media, because we don't have the same kind of checks, the rigorous checks that they have. We don't have some lawyer going through everything we put out. You're not going to do this for this episode. I don't do it for mine. We don't make sure every single thing is perfect and spotless and whatever. We don't have the finances to do that, let alone the time. We're one-person organizations. So they are right that we get a lot of these things wrong. One example of that was that the alternative media or Twitter, they spread somebody spread a lie that the person who stabbed children a couple of weeks ago was a Muslim, and it led to a bunch of crazy, horrible people trying to burn a mosque. That's terrible, and that's why I didn't retweet that, because I needed to hear an official source like the police telling me exactly, the truth. And it wasn't a Muslim. Not that if it had been, that would have been an excuse to burn a bloody mosque. Terrible, terrible. So there are problems with the alternative media. Elon Musk is trying to do what he can with that, and he's introduced community notes as a way to sort of say to people, hey, this might not be true, what's being said. So that's the problem with the alternative media. But when that's spoken about by the mainstream media, they talk as if they don't have the same issues on the other side. I mean, they have an organization of thousands of people. We know about cults. We know how cult dynamics work. There's thousands of people in a huge hierarchy in a closed organization at the BBC. So of course you're going to get people who are incentivized to hold certain views. We know from studies over years and years and years that as much as we like to think that we hold beliefs because we believe them to be true, the reality is that we believe things because they make us feel good about ourselves and we fit in better with our groups. If you were born in the 1800s in the United States, in certain states, you would have believed that slavery was a good thing. Almost certainly. Most people would have done. So the people around you, that's how you shape your beliefs. You want to fit in. So if you have something like the BBC and you have a few people who are quite progressive minded or magical thinking minded, I would say, around the trans issue, that's going to filter down. And people who, had they been on the outside, might have had different views in the BBC are going to feel a little bit compelled to hold the views that their colleagues hold. And gradually that starts to filter down, and it filters through all the TV channels. So I think that's going on one hand. On the other hand, they're starting to see social media people like myself and like you and like all the rest of them as the enemy. So again, we know how that works with cults. You start to batten down the hatches. You start to go like anything that those people believe, we're against that. Both sides do it, of course. But they know that Elon Musk believe the whole trans thing's ridiculous. They know that many of us think that, and so they are just going to go in harder and harder and just start talking about this guy as if it's a woman. I don't think a single one of them is doing this deliberately or being deceptive on purpose. I think they've fallen for something in the way that we all fall for things, but it's scary the level to which they've fallen for it.
Yeah, and I think I think it's the oh, they think that the trans thing is ridiculous. That angers people just as a sentence, right? And I do kind of get why it makes people angry. I would probably say, I think that it's a mental health condition and it needs real support because people are really suffering with this. But then, people will still watch this video and go, you hate trans people. And probably now even I will hate them now, even though that is not the case, and I kind of want to have this conversation with you to kind of bring that to the forefront, that the things that we are saying are not hateful.
Well, you're right. And I think, okay, so if people want to see an example of the trans, the issue with the trans thing, when I say the trans thing, I mean the idea that a man can be a woman and that sex is on a spectrum, and it's not. I've spoken to so many biologists who would tell me even intersex people or people with DSDs are either male or female, but they have issues that stem the development of genitalia and other secondary characteristics, sex characteristics. I don't know enough to talk about it.
Only fish can be intersex.
Clownfish. Clownfish can change their sex, apparently. I think it's right that friends of yours have said that it's not a trans issue, the Iman Khalif boxing stuff, because we're talking about an intersex person. That's not a trans issue. Where it does become a trans issue, though, is the reaction by the Olympic Committee, the IOC, the International Olympics Committee, because they appear to have decided that they are judging whether someone is a man or woman and whether they should compete in the men or women's sports based on their identity, their gender identity and their passport. And that comes from trans ideology. If we didn't have trans ideology, they would just go, okay, this person's intersex. Do they have high testosterone? What's their chromosomes? Okay, that's a man. They will fight with the men. It would be simple as that. The reason they can't do that is because they would be betraying the trans ideology that they've bought into. So in that sense, this is a trans issue, but it shouldn't be. At heart, it is not. This is just someone with a unique genetic disorder. I think you're right. I shouldn't be too inflammatory with my words about the trans thing, and I feel compassionate to individual people, not to ideologies, and that's hard to explain. But I know a lot of, not that many actually, because there aren't that many, but I know quite a few trans people, and like the ones you've spoken about, that none of them believe in the trans madness, as I call it. None of them believe that a man can actually be a woman or anything like that. They, for various different reasons, have decided to identify as trans. And many of them know that it's just a thing that they're doing that doesn't actually affect policy, that men who are potentially violent attackers should not be in women's prisons. That's the madness I'm talking about. I'm not talking about individual trans people who feel they need to present in that way. All I can do is offer them support. But I would say that I'm not sure... I'm certainly not sure that I don't actually know how to feel about this, because the more that we sort of say trans is a real genuine thing that makes people happier and is has a root symptom or is a real thing, the more teenagers, as they did with anorexia, as they did with exorcism, are going to be pushed into this. And so I think sometimes I just have to say I don't know, and I just don't know what to think there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the smartest thing to do, really, isn't it? Is to, if you don't know, is not to pretend to know. I do not want to end up on the wrong side of history. Do you feel that? Do you feel that kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah, and people's experiences are so valid, their own lived experience. But everyone that I've been watching interviews with so far, Buck Angel's a really good one. Blair White, as I said, Richie, of course, that you interviewed. She got 1 million views in 2 weeks or something. Really, really good interview. Please go and watch it. I will link it. Their experience is also valid. You can't be like, well, you're denying the trans experience when the trans people are saying, this is my experience and this is how I feel about it. And, you know, we're not women. We're trying to alleviate our symptoms of gender dysphoria. Like, that's what's happening. And I kind of feel like the people who are the extremists in this, you know, this place, the ones that yell at everyone and call everyone a transphobe, who are writing comments right now telling us that we should be cancelled and whatever, are not trans, or are not for trans people. That's my opinion. I don't think people who are extreme in this are for helping and supporting people who struggle with being transgender.
I like what you say about being on the right side of history, because I think we all have a compulsion to feel that way. And I think it would help if those who are screaming at us in the comments, if they are, to understand that Kelly and I also have that feeling that we want to be and hope to be on the right side of history. And we can't know who among us is right. And I think the best thing we can do is say we literally don't know. All we can do is, Bertrand Russell is one of my favorite quotes. I can never get it right, but it was something like, look not for, do not what you think would be good for society or beneficial for society were it true. Just go with facts, basically. That's paraphrasing it. We if you look at every time an ideology or an authoritarian regime has gone wrong, it's because they've started looking at things they wish were true. So the Nazis looked into eugenics, they sort of skewed the numbers a bit, and they decided it was an extraordinary claim without extraordinary evidence. They decided certain people were less worthy than others, which is a horrific thing to assume, but based on their immutable features, and that those people were causing havoc and ruining the society, and they were the victims. Every time a society has gone wrong, actually, you'll find it stems from victimhood. I think victimhood is one of the most dangerous and not looked at enough, underreported perhaps, traits in causing just utter devastation. Because if you're a victim, and if you frame your situation as being a victim, and people need to remember the Nazis absolutely did do this. The Nazis were down on their knees after World War I, having been one of the richest nations in the world, being the highest status nation in the world at that time, suddenly not only lost a war, but were brought to their knees by the Allies, because the Allies hadn't maybe learned from history or didn't yet know that when you defeat an enemy, you need to make sure they can build themselves back up. Because if not, the next generation are just going to grow up and resent the rest of the world. And that's what happened. Suddenly they went through the Great Depression. They were in abject poverty, having been this huge power of a nation. And suddenly there's a guy in the street saying, hey, I can fix all of this. We've been made into the victim of the world. Everybody's kicking us around. Who can we blame? So I think that's all we can do. We can't ever know if we're going to be on the good side of history or the bad side. We need to know, and we need to teach more in schools, that it doesn't, or very rarely happens, in a way, if we're talking about the next time, like the bad times will come. It doesn't happen the way you expect it. It never happens the way you expect it. It does, especially if that's the way it happened last time. And if we're looking back to the Nazis, that's what everyone always talks about, because that's the last time that the West, and I'm not talking about the Stasi or anything like that, I'm talking about a big thing happening in the West in the 1930s, where everything went utterly wrong and the world was at war. And that came from the right, it seems. A lot of people dispute whether they actually were on the right, but it seems like the far right, from an angry, shouting man who hated minorities and all of these things. Well, I can guarantee you that the next time the dark times come, it is not going to be that. It is not going to be someone, because we've had that. We had the British National Party about 10 years ago, and they got about 1% of the vote, right? Because people are disgusted by racism now. They just are, because that's what we've learned and that's what our society is based on. What always happens is, whatever is the big thing of the time, people get swept up in it and stuff starts to go wrong and they stop looking at facts. The big thing of the time, apart from victimhood in the Nazi time, was eugenics, and people got just swept away with it. Now, the big thing is identity politics. Again, victimhood, the idea of all of these flags. And once people get a feeling that they can go out and shout and abuse and be bigoted and judge people by their skin color and say, you're a white person, blah, blah, blah. Once they can do that and still remain the good guys in that moment, once a society has made it so that they can do that, that's when we're in trouble. So that's why I don't worry too much about the right now, or the racists and all of that. We had a week ago, there was this big worry, like everyone was like, oh, put all cardboard on your windows, there's going to be a huge problem. The far right are all mobilizing. They're coming out after decades of hiding, all the big far right. No one came. There isn't a far right here anymore because they're not incentivized to exist, because everyone hates them and no one wants to be hated. So there isn't a far right.
So it was just a bunch of people shouting into the void. Like there was round the corner from where I live. There was literally supposed to be this huge thing, and I was like, oh, I wonder if I should like go and see what's going on, see what's happening down there. And someone that we know, friend of a friend, was down there and was like, there's nobody here. Like, there's no one from the other side here. We're all defending this building against the air. Like, nobody's there. Absolutely wild. And there was a lot of fear mongering around it. Like, these angry thugs are going to, loot from buildings. And, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't think it's far right extremists that are looting from Greggs and Shoe Zone. And it's people that want.
It's just a bunch of nutters.
Yeah, exactly.
I wrote today in my Substack actually about something called the Reichstag fire, and this was something that set off the issues that started with Hitler's Germany. Somebody set fire to the Parliament building of Germany. So I didn't even know that much about this, and I've been reading about it recently. Somebody set fire to it, and it became this big excuse for Hitler to clamp down on all sorts of free speech. So he started going on about the communists. So whereas we're talking about the far right now, it was the communists. All the communists are going to get us. They're all ruining our lives. They're doing all this stuff. They're setting fire to the parliament. They caught that guy and executed him. But they immediately afterwards, Hitler started repealing free speech, getting rid of all sorts of things, but basically setting up Germany for the Nazis that would follow. Now, we had a really similar event. Now, I don't want anyone to think I'm actually equating Starmer to Hitler here at all. I'm just saying that the pieces are in place. I'm sure it won't go anywhere near that way, but there are pieces that are in place. Instead of the burning of the Reichstag, there was the burning of a mosque. That led to the media all colluding. Even the Daily Mail was on side with the Guardian and on side with the Parliament, with the government. Usually, newspapers hold the government to account, but they were all on the side of Keir Starmer and the government. Everyone together saying the danger is the far right. Tommy Robinson. Now, Tommy Robinson, I've been in contact with him. He's like off on a beach somewhere. He's not involved, and he sometimes tweets things which sometimes are a bit silly, sometimes a bit whatever. It's not mobilizing a great army of people in the UK. So people got upset. People tried to burn a mosque. Awful, awful thing they did. There really weren't very many of them, but the media has tried to scaremonger by making us feel like there are, just as Hitler did with the communists. Suddenly, Starmer, in the days that followed, started getting people arrested for social media comments. This is incredibly scary and authoritarian. And people listening and watching will go, no, but that's not an issue because this is the left. Well, who cares? The left and the right have killed just as many people. What matters is authoritarianism, and it comes where you least expect it. That's what people have to realize. And by the way, I always already see the comments. He's trying to say that Keir Starmer's Hitler. I am not saying that. What I am saying, though, is that his first 2 or 3 weeks...
Make for a good thumbnail.
You can put that in the thumbnail if you want. His first 2 or 3 weeks were chilling in terms of how authoritarian they were. It might be he repeals them in the next few weeks and we all go about having a lovely jolly party and everything's fine. So I'm not saying he is Hitler, but I am saying the first few weeks have been really scary, and there is a full-on war from the newspapers in this country, probably in the US as well, and the government together against social media, against YouTubers like us, against Elon Musk, against all of us. And I would encourage anyone watching who is reading this stuff, when you hear Tommy Robinson did this, Elon Musk did that, go and research it and see what they actually said and how bad it actually was. And that doesn't mean they don't get things wrong. They do, but just so do the BBC, as we've seen with the Khalif thing. So
it's good advice. It's good advice. And as always, it's coming from a place of check it out for yourself. It's compassionate, and it's about not just blindly following what people are telling you, right? On that, I want to ask you about J.K. Rowling, possibly. Now, genuinely, I grew up with J.K. Rowling, like, love her books. You know, it was a really, really great source of escapism for me growing up in the crazy shit I grew up in. And when she started getting attacked on, you know, Twitter and things for her problematic tweets and stuff, I'm not going to lie, I didn't even look into it. I kind of heard it from my friends and was like, oh my gosh, this is devastating. Like, my favorite childhood author is a horrible person. What the hell? And, you know, I looked into it eventually. You know, I was like, what are these tweets that were so bad? You know, and I couldn't find a single thing that she had said that was hateful towards transgendered people. I couldn't find a single thing she had said that was hateful. And then I start to think, am I crazy? Because why is everyone around me saying that this woman is being hateful? I'm reading it and I don't see it. It makes me feel like I'm crazy. I don't know. Have you ever felt that?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, it's the madness of the crowd. There's been loads of literature written about this, and again, this would be useful to learn at school. You know, instead of, I don't know, what did we learn about Oxbow Lakes and geography or something? You know, it would be interesting to learn about the madness of the crowd, to learn about, firstly, what I was saying before, that it never comes from where you expect it, and that you might be wrong about things. We need to learn critical thinking, but also to look things up for yourself and read about J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling, one of the most positive feminists in recent history. I think the only billionaire who made herself not a billionaire because she gave so much money away to charities, which by itself is not necessarily a redeeming feature, because a lot of philanthropic people are deviants like Jimmy Savile. But I think in J.K. Rowling's case, it's probably not the case. This is somebody who was beaten to within an inch of her life by domestic violence by her ex-husband, I believe it was, on the streets of Portugal, I think, who has to now watch the BBC cheer and laugh and shout at her while male boxers beat up women. And there was that great the Peep Show guys, David Mitchell and Robert Webb, that Mitchell and Webb show. There's a great clip that's become a meme where they're the Nazis, or something like the Nazis. They've got like a skeleton on their you know, they look evil and they're like all happy about going to war, and then they go, hang on, are we the bad guys? Because they're looking, they look evil. And he's like,
have you noticed that our caps have actually got little pictures of skulls on them?
I don't.
Hans, are we the baddies?
I think that's the thing we need to be taught in school, really. We might be the bad guys. What's so frustrating about the J.K. Rowling stuff, I've read all of the books back to back in 5 different languages. I just obsessed every time with Harry Potter. And Sirius Black is just the key portrayal of this. I mean, Sirius Black was for those who haven't read Harry Potter, he was the bogeyman, the target that everybody was against, to distract everybody from the true danger. Well, that's right now. I mean, look, Tommy Robinson, I don't want to sort of necessarily, you know, bank everything on him. I don't know enough about his past, and he's associated himself with some really, really murky people. But Elon Musk, you know, Ricky Gervais, J.K. Rowling, these are now the enemies. These are like the Hitler of today. It's Ricky Gervais. Ricky Gervais, who again gives so much money to animal stuff. He's a vegan. He's like, doesn't want to hurt a fly. These are not the Gestapo. So Rowling's Sirius Black was the perfect example of that. But she was like super woke. You know, she had Dumbledore. She didn't put it in the book, but she decided to tell everybody, I think mistakenly, because these are things.
He's gay.
Yeah, that he was gay. I think that was a mistake, because I think I don't mind Dumbledore being gay. By all means, make him gay in the book if you want. But I think, you know, leave the texts as they are. Let me read that and see it for myself. But, you know, it didn't bother me. Fine. She said he's gay. The point is, she's an absolute hero for gay rights, for feminist rights. And she is the one. Do people not see that this is a distraction? Do they not see that this is a cultish, Scientology-like thing where we're being told this is the enemy and the good guy is Tom Cruise, or the good guy is like who's the good guys in all of this? The good guys are this is very British, so sorry Americans, but James O'Brien, the Have I Got News for You guys, Nish what was his name? Is it Nish Kumar? All the guys who are like regularly on BBC and all the mainstream TV channels, and they make the enemy Gervais, J.K. Rowling, and all of that. Well, that suits their narrative, doesn't it? So I don't think you have to be a mad Russell Brand conspiracy theorist to be able to say, okay, maybe a lot of the stuff he says is going on, that is a bit out there, about all the conspiring madness and his arms in the air and everyone's going crazy. But we can also admit that, of course, there are cultish elements and there are narratives. And the idea that J.K. Rowling, apparently it is Rowling and not Rowling, but I'm not sure on that, is some sort of... No, but no one seems to know. But I'm just going with Rowling, David Bowie instead of Bowie. I don't even know. The idea that she's your bad guy? Come on. What a loving, lovely person. And she warned us about all of this. That is what Harry Potter is about. That people will create a false narrative about the evil people while they distract you from their own means and their own needs. And that is, people need to remember that the media right now, the mainstream media, has lost 30% and growing of its revenue and audience to social media. There is a reason social media is what is being attacked right now, and that is money talking.
I don't think any of us out here are above believing bollocks, right? Any of us can have the wool pulled over our eyes or tricked or whatever, and this is not a you're wrong or whatever. But we were talking, last week when we were setting this up about how, people in really extreme groups like cults, Scientology, can lean towards what is sort of presented as this all tolerant, all loving, be kind thing, is what I think the left is sort of presented as on a really surface level, even though I don't believe that, and lean into those views really heavily, which becomes just as extremist as what they freaking came from, and that's also dangerous, I think, is what I'm trying to say with that.
Yeah, that's human nature, isn't it? No, I'm telling you that no human, even Hitler, no human ever woke up and went, "Mwahaha, I'm going to be evil." I mean, there are psychopaths. They do exist. They're very rare. But psychopaths don't even do that. They don't go, "Mwahaha, I'm going to be evil." They just exist and they take what they want, and that's it. So that wouldn't be enough to grow an ideology. An ideology has to grow around true believers. It is thought that Tom Cruise is a true believer. He's not sitting there just going, "Ha ha, we faked it, we've got them all." He is a true believer. Every bad ideology, every evil ideology in history has started with true believers. So the fact that you're out there on the streets going, "This is obviously the right way, the most selfless way, the most empathetic way," that means nothing. And it might well be that the cause you support is all of those things, but we don't know that just from the fact that you feel like you're being empathetic and nice and helpful and be kind. Especially, I mean, the amount of people in those marches who were basically Antifa marches, and I'm getting messages from my neighborhood WhatsApp saying, "Hey guys, all come down." They don't usually talk politics, but they're so sure of their beliefs that they don't even believe this is politics. It's just common sense. They need to go out there to destroy the far right. Well, I saw loads of videos afterwards of people screaming horrible things about Jews.
Wow.
Right? And we've seen this before. Yeah, loads that cut off their necks, all of this stuff, and often framed as Zionists, right? The evil Zionist, the evil this or that. But I'm going to ascertain that they mean Jews and that they're not necessarily friendly to Jewish people. And that offends me.
Of course.
But I also think, look, they are free to have their beliefs and their ideologies, and we can't start locking people up just because they disagree with me. But man, it's this fatal misunderstanding of humanity, and we fall for it every single time, that because I believe I'm doing something virtuous, I'm with the good guys, and they forget that that's exactly what the Nazis thought. It's exactly what the Bolsheviks thought in the Soviet Union. They thought they're here to get rid of the Tsar, right? They're getting rid of basically the royal family, which wasn't a great system either, and they're going to now be there for the workers. Well, I'm sure that, people were marching in the streets just as they are now, but it didn't work. So again, it's a difference between doing what you think you want to do and what you think makes you a good person, and actually sitting down and going, what is actually doing good? And that's extremely complicated. I interviewed someone about this. It's called effective altruism. People are able to actually weigh up moral decisions. And I wouldn't rely on this as a scientific endeavor, but it's quite an interesting philosophical practice. So if you took it to its extreme, effective altruism, in a burning building, you would save a Picasso rather than a baby or a child, because that Picasso you could then sell for a lot of money and help 1,000 children with that money. Now, only a psychopath could actually endorse that ideology. You would have to save the baby. I would save the baby. But it's really interesting. I mean, that's the opposite. That's the other extreme to these people who are just letting their empathy or whatever they think it is run wild without thinking about what's actually helping, and the fact that just because you feel tribal and excited doesn't mean you're doing good, because all the people who did bad felt exactly like you do.
I want to speak to, the people who say that people like yourself and me as well are on here talking about these kind of subjects as a grift to make money and whatever. Now, we both make some income from YouTube, which is correct. I know it's your full-time gig, as it should be. You put a lot of money into hosting your channel, inviting your guests on, paying a production team, completely freaking fair. But I would argue that there'd be so many more easier ways to make money that doesn't get you banned from bookshops and have to deal with hateful comments online. If you wanted to talk about the things that those people who are suppressing free speech about, if you were like, you know what, I just want to make a lot of money and have the most people agree with me, you could do that, but you're not doing that. So when people say you're in it for a grift, it damages your business to be honest about how you feel. So I don't get how that's a thing.
Yeah, well, look, you're right, and I want to give those people the benefit of the doubt as well, because they've got a point too. The first point to make, as you're saying, I mean, I started doing the YouTube stuff. It was cults and Scientology, and there was a point where I was doing 2 or 3 live streams a night, and I was doing them, alongside or with you, or at the same time as you and Aaron Smith-Levin and all the guys in the Scientology crowd. And there was one point where it was going mad. It was like Ashton Kutcher news and Danny Masterson and Tom Cruise all at once. And the money coming in at that point, I mean, I spent like 10 years on minimum wage, in different countries and struggling to just, and I know that feeling of having to think about how I'm going to earn enough to be able to pay my rent, at the end of the month, which is a feeling probably most people have, especially at some point in their life. So I don't think that's unusual, but it's just to say I know that feeling. But the money I was earning during that Scientology time at its peak was, well, in a month I was earning twice as much as I would earn previously in a year or a year and a half or even 2 years just in 1 month. It was ridiculous money. And for the first time I was able to save up a bit, and I put it down for a mortgage for a house. I mean, the amount that houses cost, I mean, it didn't go that far. But
you're a millennial, right?
Yeah, I think so. 89.
You're one of the ones who made it to get a house. I'm proud of you.
I got it. Mortgage is through the roof though, but fine. But okay, that's where I was. And then there was the Meghan Markle stuff. And so I started doing that. And the money was really good revenue. But whenever I spoke on the cult channel about cultish or magical thinking aspects that didn't chime with the progressive left, everyone went crazy at me. And those videos didn't do well at all. And it ruined the rest of the channel. And so I had a choice at that point. I thought about this deeply. And I thought I can either continue doing Scientology and some of the royal stuff and have a nice channel that I really enjoy, and might not continue making that kind of money because you always have to ride that wave, but it's going to give me a very comfortable living. But I would feel like there's something I'm not touching on that I want to touch, as a journalist. And I think anyone who becomes a journalist worth their salt wants to sort of pull at that what's the expression? Pull at that thread and tug away and go, what's beyond it? Why am I not allowed to speak about trans ideology? Why can't I say some people are concerned about mass immigration of many people with views and beliefs, nothing to do with their mutable features, skin color, or anything like that. I couldn't care less about skin, but with some beliefs that are very different to our own. and it might be too fast, and we're struggling right now as a country. Why can't we talk about these things openly while remaining sort of lefty, socially, whatever, pro-choice, veganism, all that stuff? And so I had this choice of, okay, I can either keep going down this route, or I'm going to start a brand new channel. It's probably going to get 10,000 subscribers in the first year, or less than that, and maybe earn me a few £100 or whatever. So I thought, this is going to kill me. I had a proper discussion with my family. You know, we're not going to be able to, we've got the house now at least. Would probably just about be able to afford the mortgage and all of these things, but I have to do this because it's important. I don't know. This isn't something that's being talked about enough in the media. It's only being done by wackos, you know, like, or for the most part anyway. I mean, there are a few really good people who were doing it before me, of course. So yeah, you're right. The grift thing really frustrates me because it feels like it was the opposite. As it happens, in the first year, the channel is at nearly 200,000 subscribers after, like, I think it's like 8 months that we've been going. So it's doing really, really well.
That's amazing.
Thank you. But then it's totally different demographics who followed me before. But even so, as you say, I now, because I do them all in person, blah, 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 I spend a fortune. So I earn significantly less now than I was doing before. Maybe a quarter of what I was, less than that actually, a fifth or a sixth. But it's important to me. Those people, however, they do have a point. I mean, we all have this issue with audience capture. We're sitting here trying to be objective journalists and to be ethical and all of these things. But now I know, or I have a better understanding of how belief works. It's impossible that my beliefs weren't at least in some way, even if it's 1%, affected by what I know subconsciously will do better on my YouTube channel. So if I were to decide tomorrow that Richie Herron is wrong and the D-trans thing, oh, screw them, I don't care about them, that's not good for my channel, because then I don't do an interview with him. It doesn't get 1 million views. If I want to do a video about some of the causes that are important to me, like not killing animals, right? That's really important to me. That's not going to do well on my channel. So I stay away from it. If I want to do things about the genuine fear of the far right, I don't think we have much in the UK, but there probably is somewhere in America that I could do something about. That's not going to do well because of my audience capture. So I have that issue just as the mainstream TV channels have. And I think all I can do is try to remain aware of it and try to criticize myself as much as possible. But we are incentivized, even if I'm earning less than I was, I'm still incentivized by money, by views, by status. So that's just something we have to, as I say, just be aware of and try to not let it completely dictate us.
Yeah, I've really struggled with that, being on this platform, you know, with that, like, oh, the views is what, you know, what will bring you your income. And I don't know, I kind of I had a period where I was like, maybe I'm going to do this is my thing, and this is going to be it, and we're going to make it work. And it's not that easy. It's very difficult. And I think only a small percentage of people who try this out are going to do well, you know. It's definitely more important to me that I make stuff I care about, that is authentic to me, that I'm proud of. You know, I edit video. I want to make stuff that I'm proud of and that I can put out there and go, this is the stuff I presented to the world, you know, when I'm in my 60s or whatever. I don't know that necessarily means that it will be a job for me creating content on YouTube. That doesn't matter so much because I have other things that I do. But if it was just the only thing that I had, I would feel quite in a chokehold, I think, from that audience capture, like you said. And it's really volatile kind of place to be. I don't know. It's really scary, you know?
Oh, yeah. Look, I put out a video recently because a lot of my videos on heretics, they sort of rail against the wokeness, and I know loads of people will comment saying wokeness just means being kind and aware of social injustice. That's what wokeness should mean.
I used to think it meant that. You know, oh, it's being, you know, awake to stuff. Like, that's what it means. You're being like open to new ideas, like back in the day.
Yeah,
it don't mean that anymore, though, does it?
What lovely thoughts. It's a lovely thought, and it's a nice thought, and we all want to feel like we're those people, and not only because we're so wonderful and nice, but also because we get to feel like fashion trendsetters. We get to feel like the people who were the first ones to realize, hey, don't you realize that these people have some different disadvantage nobody else had thought of, and it makes you feel sort of fashionable. It gives you status to come to that realization. But I did a a video that I titled "The Woke Right," because it's often the woke left, isn't it? But I think that the right are just as identitarian. They're just as likely to say you can't say that because you're from a different skin color or different sex or whatever. They're just as likely to cancel you. This happened recently when Trump was nearly assassinated. We saw with the band Tenacious D, they're a comedy act, Jack Black and Jack Black's partner, his name's Kyle Gass or something Gass. He just made a joke, which was a horrible joke, really. But he just made this joke of, I hope for his birthday wishes, I hope they don't miss next time.
Make a wish, Canada. Don't miss Trump next time.
It's really not a nice joke, but comedians are there to push the boundaries. They are there. We need them to do that. They are there to make fun, particularly of politicians such as Trump, and particularly of extremely wealthy politicians who are the president of the United States. That is what comedians are there for. And they were nearly booted out of Australia. There were talks going on to kick them out of Australia. They were on tour there. They were dropped by their agents.
Oh.
The band split up just because of that joke. And I tried to tell all the other sort of anti-woke people who were loving this, I was saying, no, this is just as bad. This is just as bad. It's the same cancel culture, the same. And in a cancel culture or fear that we have right now where Keir Starmer is locking people up for what they say on social media, it creates a grey blob. It creates a vacuum because everybody has to think really carefully before they speak. And into that blob goes authoritarianism and the death of beauty. There is no beauty in art in a world intent on cancelling. And that goes for the left and the right and the centre. It goes for anyone who says these people are people with whom I disagree. And instead of just saying, so I won't listen to their comedy, saying, I demand that their agent cancel them, or otherwise I can't enjoy their other agents' clients and things like that. I tried to put that out as like, hey, the woke right. And it just bombed on my channel. It just bombed. And it was really sad for me because I want to have a go at the right as much as I do the left. And I know that my channel, it won't work. And if you do one bad one like that, your next videos don't do as well. So some people might be... people might be thinking, oh, but why don't you do one every 3 or 4? But it affects the whole channel if you keep putting out videos that your audience don't want. One of the reasons that they don't want views that are like lefty and woke and whatever is because they get enough of that on the BBC. So people need a reason to leave the BBC and CNN and come and watch YouTube. They need different views. So there is audience capture, certainly.
I've got just 2 little questions to end on with you on this. And thank you so much for chatting to me about this stuff. I do not think I am the most, educated on all this stuff.
Yes, you are.
I think you're much smarter than me.
No, I'm not.
But I love us having a talk about it always. I want to ask you if you've ever heard of a sexual orientation called MAPS. You ever heard of that?
Yes, I know exactly what that is. Can I say it?
You can, yeah, absolutely.
Those are minor attracted persons.
Yes, correct. I learned about this recently whilst trying to understand the ridiculousness of how many new genders are out there, including static gender, pup gender, xeno gender, not to be confused with xenu gender for my Scientology watchers out there. The map gender actually, I feel, should enrage everyone on every side of this coin, because predators are trying to normalize being attracted to minors. There are charities for them to help them all accept each other and whatever. Maybe that's fine. Maybe they should be allowed to do that. But should they be allowed to change what they are labeled as, which is PDF files, to minor attracted persons? What do you think about it? Because I am so mad about it.
Well, look, I'm naturally a contrarian, so I'm going to try and give the other view, I think. I mean, the first thing to say is you're absolutely right. All these ridiculous genders have just led to ridiculousness. And if you take this is a socially left issue, and I agree with a lot of the socially left stuff. But unfortunately, and a lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of the times when we go far left, I'm not talking about your average, center left person. I'm talking about the far left. You do go into the realms of, as we call them, PDF files. We did have that with Foucault in France. We had quite a few philosophers who were pushing for adult-child things and saying that was okay, and it's disgusting. And that's when you take your philosophy too far. And there are still people advocating for that. So yeah, that is part of the madness. It is also part of the sort of far left is a big problem there. That, again, it's not to suggest that there aren't just as many PDF files on the right, but the attitude of the left, because I've met people, I looked into these people in Berlin where they've got a therapy for PDF files. There was a woman I met who was a far leftist who held meetings once a month for these people, which I don't think in itself is a problem. I mean, they need to talk, the ones who are not offending or whatever. But she let one of them babysit her children when she went out, and I said to her, "What the hell are you doing? You have no right. I know they're your kids, and you can do pretty much anything you want with them. You can take them out of school, put them in school, do this or that. You cannot leave them with a babysitter who has this inclination or condition or illness or whatever it is." And she was just like, "Oh, come on, you have to trust people, blah, blah, blah." That's the far left. That's what happens when you take it really far. Again, I can't stress enough that I am not talking about the centre left or even the middle far left. I'm talking about people who are really at the far end of it. We do have an issue of semantics around PDF files. Firstly, the fact that YouTube won't even let us say the word for these people is just insane. But that is all part of a culture that is so scared to even talk about this that we don't spend enough time trying to think about how we can stop it and stop it happening to children. That is all we should be concerned with. We can deal with the rest later. The number one priority is how can we stop it? I think 1 in 6 girls are, by PDF files, and 1 in 9 or 10 boys. Every stat you find is slightly different because it's very hard to collect that kind of data. But even if it's 1 in 1,000, that's not good enough. Even if it's 1 in 1,000,000, yeah, nobody should ever have to go through that. It's the worst thing that can happen to someone. But what do? We say, let's not talk about it. And I think that's not helping. So what everyone says, on the left, they go too far, as I've just discussed. On the right, they seem to just say, just lock them up, kill them all. And that's not helpful either, because you can't, fine, let's pretend that is what we should do. Where are you going to find them? You don't find them until they've already offended. It's too late. So nobody's looking at an actual solution. Now, the people I spoke to in Berlin, the clinic there, they are looking for the best solution they can find, which is finding a way for these guys who have the condition but haven't acted on it to go and speak to therapists and be disabused of their cognitive biases. Because a lot of them, when you want to do something enough, you find other people who want to do it, and you all tell each other, oh, maybe it's okay to do it. And then because the rest of society says, you're all monsters, they go, oh, well, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. And they all just go into the dark web and they tell each other it's okay, and then they offend. If they can go into therapy and be told, you're a human being here, we respect you and love you, and we want you to stop doing it. You have responsibility now. You are a human being. You have responsibility to be part of our society, and never do that to a child. The theory is, behind this clinic, that will significantly stop people from offending. But apart from in Germany, we don't do that because people are afraid of the idea of giving these guys therapy because the optics aren't good. But I don't care about the optics if it saves thousands of children's lives. So that's the difficult situation we're in. And the issue with semantics is, I heard Joe Rogan speaking, I think, wrongly about this. And I like Joe Rogan, but I think he was wrong because he was talking about the PDF files, and he was saying that some people were trying to give them therapy or talk to them. And he said, why would you, how can you even talk to a guy who's done that to a child? And I wanted to sort of ring in and go, no. Only a very small percentage of these people with the condition have actually done that to the child. It's so do we give the same name to the ones who have offended as the ones who haven't? I haven't figured this out. I don't know what the actual, and if we want those people to feel, who have never offended and hopefully never will, if we want them to feel part of our society so that they have the responsibility not to offend, is it not better to call them MAPs instead of PDF files and associating them with the ones who did offend, because then they will as well? So that's the really, really complex thing. I know, I totally get this, what you were saying. That I don't think it is being spread around as like an acceptable just a gender or attraction or anything like that. And if it is, that's disgusting, because it's absolutely not. It is wrong, and it is. I don't know what we'd call it, but maybe a psychiatric illness. It's a horrible thing. And you don't have to agree with what I'm saying. And I always say this when I talk about these people, you don't have to sympathize with them. You don't have to go, I want to call this MAPs, I want to call them that because I feel like they're lonely. I mean, you could feel that way, but you might feel, no, I hate them as well and I want them to die. Whatever. The point is, what is the best thing to do to stop as much abuse as possible? And that's the most complex subject ever.
Yeah, I just found it recently, and I don't know, I got so enraged by the whole idea of it that, because, there's like febophiles and all kinds of different files for, different sexual disorders, and I don't understand why,
A hebophile.
Hebophile, right.
Is that a hebophile or hebophile in America? Those are, they seem to be interested in not prepubescent, but post-pubescent children, 14 to 17 or whatever. Loads of sort of famous people from history had this. I think I'm right in saying Nabokov did. Obviously, he wrote Lolita. Is it F. Scott Fitzgerald? I can't defame these people if I've got it wrong because they're dead, so it doesn't matter. But I don't want to besmirch their memory either. But I'm pretty sure quite a few of these guys had it in for teenagers. We don't know. Nothing matters. I've just accused loads of people and ruined their reputation. But loads of men throughout history. I mean, look, kings used to marry 9-year-olds, didn't they? So we've moved, hopefully, beyond that into a culture that knows that is not just wrong, it's abominable. It's horrific. And I wish sometimes the conversation could be more about how do we stop them offending than how do we punish them. But I think the human need to punish is stronger, and that's not to denigrate the punishers, because they're absolutely right to feel that way, but let's stop them offending as well.
Yeah. My last question for you that I have is something I've never heard you talk about, but I wondered what your thoughts were considering the trans stuff you talk about on your channel. That is what your thoughts about drag is. Drag queens, drag entertainment. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't have a strong opinion. I'm very clear on individual liberty and people being able to do what they want, providing it doesn't harm others. I feel like drag has been conflated recently, maybe deliberately by some progressive circles, with what they call queerness and the whole trans thing and everything like that. And it's led to, I don't know how common it actually is. I've seen viral videos of drag acts where you can basically see, the balls hanging out and stuff like that. They're so sexual at children's schools and kindergartens and things like that. I'm not a fan of that. I think that needs to stop. And I think that's awful. But I wouldn't want to stop people in clubs, doing their thing and being all draggy. I did have someone talk about it actually for the first time the other day, Malcolm Clark, who is a gay man who hates a lot of the, what he calls queer culture. I mean, a lot of gay people now feel they've been let down by queer culture. Queer was a bad word when I was younger. Now it seems to encompass not just any sexuality and any gender, but just anybody who thinks they're different. If you feel like you're different, there are loads of people, like there was that woman, the Icelandic woman, horrible woman, I thought, at the Eurovision, who said that her and her boyfriend were queer. And it's like, you're two straight people who look normal apart from tattoos, and you're appropriating the veneer of queerness. It's like, we stand out, we're different, we're fun and amazing. And it's like, well, if you actually had any personality, you wouldn't probably need to do that. But fine. But many gay people hate it because firstly, it's taking something away from them. It's making them feel not at home in their own LGBT circles or LGB circles for many of them, they feel. And also pride, what happened to pride? Because you've got to remember, and it's hard for most young people to remember now, they weren't alive, but the fight for gay rights was about dignity. Also safety, protection, not being beaten up for being accused of being gay, not being beaten up if you had AIDS, or scaremongering about you're going to spread it to everyone and told horrible things all the time. But it was also fundamentally about dignity and civil rights and wanting to have the same rights as everyone else. And they also, this is what a lot of gay people have made clear to me, they knew that because of history, as unfair as this is, if they wanted people to take them in and to understand them and to treat them equally, they had to bring points to the table. They had to make their points clear, and they had to discuss and debate and win. And these are things that Martin Luther King did as well. These are things that all civil rights activists, unfortunately, have to do. They have to debate and use logic and critical thinking and protest in a relatively sensible way to get the same rights that everybody else has. The gay rights community, most gay people that I know anyway, would say that they've achieved that. They have gay marriage. There are very few homophobes now. There are always going to be a few psychopaths who are just horrible. But
of course,
most of society is not anti-gay or any of those things. So they feel like Pride, for example, which is this, it's gone from something of dignity to being an absolute, I mean, you might call it a celebration, but when I was last at Pride, and it was the last time that I have any intent, I've got no intention of going again, I literally looked down to my left and there was a man performing oral sex on another man in front of me, children, all of these things. That does not, just in the street out there. And there were loads of things like that going on. This was in Berlin. That does not represent gay people. It's incredibly offensive to even suggest that it does. Gay people are not interested in going out. Gay people are like straight people. The vast majority of them, they just want to have a dignified life of equality and civil rights. What it has turned into is a circus and a way for people to exploit the opportunity to get off in front of people in kinks and those kinds of things. You have your kinks, you've got your clubs for that, you've got your spaces for that. The public, where there are children and families, that is not the space for it. And Pride, that was a celebration of gay rights and dignity, is not the place for it. So many gay people are so let down by this. They're so upset with it. And anyway, Malcolm Clark, he said to me, he's never been a fan of drag, and he doesn't like that gay people are supposed to love it. And he also finds it very offensive to women. It is, if we don't do blackface anymore, why do we do woman face? We make them look sort of grotesque and ridiculous, and it's a comedy sort of act. At the same time, when it is a comedy act or some sort of dancey thing and it's art, I do understand that as well. I just think it's got a time and place. I don't think when it gets all sexual and it's in front of kids, that's where I draw the line. But look, if somebody took me out to a drag bar, I'd have a drink and I'd probably have a jolly good time.
Yeah, I mean, I happen to be a fan of drag. I think it's a very entertaining art form, and that's pretty much how I see it. I've been to shows and things like that. It involves dancing and lip singing and telling jokes. It's it's a form of entertainment first and foremost. I do hear what you say about the kids and stuff with the schools. It's not most drag artists are not doing that though. I don't think. And it's no different to princess parties, where people dress up as Elsa from Frozen and then go entertain a bunch of kids at a party. The only difference is that it is a man, and whether is that a problem or not. Personally, I don't think it is, but we can, we don't have to feel the same about it at all.
No, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, how long have I been chatting on with you for? Almost 2 hours, Andrew. I am so sorry.
It's been beautiful.
It's always amazing to talk with you. Of course, you are always welcome on the channel. If you guys want us to talk again, if you've got some controversial subjects for us to chat about that you want to know what we think about, you can put it in the comments and maybe we'll do this again. Who knows?
Yeah, well, you know what? I would just add, any sort of, we talked about this before. There are a lot of people, too many of us, who don't speak up and don't write the comments and things, And what that means is the small vocal minority of agitators and angry people who haven't really listened or have presumed the worst possible intention of everything that we've said, they end up filling the comments. So what I would say is this is a time to start doing what I'm talking about. If you are sort of moderate, maybe you agree with some things but not everything, as every conversation should be, then please write that and show your support for Kelly, because there are just not many other people who are not firmly in the anti-woke space. So I'm talking about somebody, Kelly is not in that space, who is willing to have those kinds of conversations. So please show her support, because she does this out of love and passion. And I'm such a huge fan of Kelly's. We've known each other quite a while now. We chat on WhatsApp from time to time, and it's so nice and lovely. And even if you hate me, don't let that rub off from Kelly. Just, so please show her support. And because I don't want to see 90% negative comments unless they're about me. Well, even that, I don't want that either. But, definitely not about Kelly.
I've got a thick skin, Andrew. I'll be all right. And, like Andrew said, lurkers in the back, writing your comment and deleting it. Write the comment. We want to see it. Please speak up.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Bastards.
Until next time, Andrew, and I'm sure there will be one. I will see you then. Thank you everyone for watching. Click somewhere on the screen. There'll be another video.
L. Ron Hubbard was a fantasist, a junkie womanizing Scientologist. Leave your friends and family behind. Take another course and let him fuck up your mind. Come in for a personality test. Forget psychologists, we know best. 'Cause we've been told by an alien called Xenu. Oh, L. Ron Hubbard was a hypnotist, master manipulator, Scientologist. And some kids, they never get to choose. We talk about consent, it never makes the news. Come in for a personality test. Forget psychologists, we know best. 'Cause we've been told by an alien